You threw your smartphone into a river 400 miles ago. You watched the aluminum casing disappear beneath brown water at 65 feet per minute until the screen went dark. You bought a 10-year-old black sedan from a private seller behind a strip mall for $2,200 in cash. You did not register the title. You have not spoken your real name in 68 days. You pull into the gravel parking lot of a budget highway motel off Interstate 80 at 2:14 a.m. The outdoor temperature is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The buzzing neon sign on the roof casts an amber glow across the asphalt.
What are we gonna
You step out of your car with the room key in hand, believing that at 2:14 a.m. on an empty stretch of highway between cornfields, nothing in the world knows you exist. Then a dark blue SUV with no roof rack and tinted windows pulls in behind you at a sharp 45-degree angle, blocking your vehicle in the parking stall. A man in a dark tactical windbreaker with gold lettering across the back steps out before the vehicle's engine has even stopped turning. He does not draw his weapon. He does not run. He walks toward your driver's door with the calm, methodical stride of someone who has known your location for 42 minutes. The U.S. Marshals Service did not find you by searching 3 million square miles of American asphalt. They did not find your car. They did not track your face on highway cameras. They found your younger sister, and your sister did not even know she was leading them to you. And before we go any further, if you're new here, subscribe. This channel investigates the invisible systems that operate beneath daily life. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Now, let's look at how the trap actually works. Most people believe that fleeing federal law enforcement is a problem of geography. You put distance between yourself and the courthouse. You change cities. You change your appearance. You cross state lines under the assumption that crossing a border resets the board. To the United States Marshals Service, geography is irrelevant. The Marshals are the oldest federal law enforcement agency in the country, established under the Judiciary Act of 1789. Unlike local police departments bounded by city limits or county sheriffs bounded by county lines, deputy marshals have nationwide statutory arrest authority. A federal fugitive warrant signed in Philadelphia is instantly actionable in Anchorage, Miami, or a gravel turnoff in rural Nebraska. When a fugitive warrant enters the National Crime Information Center database, the marshals do not begin by looking outward into the country. They look inward at a single sheet of paper called the Life Support System Assessment. The premise of the life support system is simple and mathematically brutal. No human being survives in complete isolation for more than 30 days without external resources. You need cash. You need prescription medication. You need shelter. You need information about what is happening in the courtroom you left behind. And unless you are an experienced intelligence operative with pre-positioned dead drops and clean financial networks, you will seek those 4 things from the same people you have trusted your entire life. The average fugitive has a circle of trust consisting of precisely 3 to 5 individuals: a mother, a sibling, a childhood friend, an ex-partner who still shares a joint bank account. The marshals do not hunt the fugitive. They occupy the lives of those 5 people. The operation begins with something called the Mail Cover Program. It is run through the United States Postal Inspection Service, and it has existed in various forms since the late 19th century. Under federal regulation, law enforcement agencies can request a mail cover on any physical address without obtaining a search warrant from a judge. For 60 days, automated optical scanners at regional postal distribution centers photograph the front and back of every piece of mail, package, and postcard addressed to your sister's apartment in Cleveland. The marshals do not open the envelopes. Opening an envelope requires a Title III warrant under the 4th Amendment. But they do not need to read the letters. They only need the metadata, the postmark location, the cancellation stamp, the return address, and the barcode printed on the bottom edge by sorting machines. If your sister receives a handwritten envelope with no return address bearing a postmark from a distribution hub in Des Moines, Iowa, the Marshals now know your operational radius has narrowed from 50 states to a 200-mile circle in the Midwest. The paper is slow. The digital net is instantaneous. Inside the Marshals Service operates an elite, highly secretive division known as the Technical Operations Group, or TOG. Headquartered in Northern Virginia, the TOG specializes in electronic surveillance, signals intelligence, and tactical tracking for fugitive apprehension. When the TOG joins an investigation, they do not tap your phone because they know you do not have one. Instead, they deploy what federal court records describe as cell site simulators, commonly known by brand names like Stingray or Kingfish. A cell site simulator is a suitcase-sized transceiver that mimics a legitimate commercial cell tower. When mounted inside an unmarked surveillance van parked 2 blocks from your sister's apartment, the device broadcasts a signal that is slightly stronger than the local Verizon or AT&T tower. Every mobile phone within a half-mile radius automatically disconnects from the real tower and registers its unique International Mobile Subscriber Identity, or IMSI, with the Marshals device. Your sister's phone is already cataloged, but the TOG is not monitoring her calls. They are monitoring anomalies. Every human being has what behavioral analysts call a pattern of life. Your sister leaves for work at 7:45 a.m. She buys coffee at the same drive-thru at 8:12 a.m. She connects to her office Wi-Fi at 8:30 a.m. She returns home at 5:45 p.m. Her mobile device generates between 1,200 and 2,000 location data points every 24 hours, creating a predictable, continuous mathematical line. When a family member becomes the support vector for a fugitive, that mathematical line breaks. At 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, your sister drives 3 miles out of her way to a supermarket she has never visited before. Her phone stays in her purse in the parking lot. Inside the supermarket, she walks to the customer service counter and buys a $500 prepaid Visa debit card with cash withdrawn from her ATM that afternoon. She believes that paying cash keeps the transaction invisible. What she does not realize is that the withdrawal itself was flagged 48 hours earlier through a Bank Secrecy Act administrative subpoena issued to her credit union. The moment the $480 left the ATM in $300 and $420 bills, an automated alert pinged the case agent's terminal. When she walked into the supermarket, a surveillance vehicle from the local fugitive task force was already idling 3 rows away in the parking lot. Now the Marshals know 2 things. Your sister has converted bank funds into untraceable plastic, and she is preparing to transfer that plastic to someone who needs to buy fuel, food, and motel rooms.
We have eyes on
the transfer is where the trap closes. You call her from a burner phone. You bought the flip phone at a discount general store in a town you passed through 2 days ago. You paid $18 in cash. You did not provide an ID. You opened the packaging with your pocket knife in the parking lot and inserted the battery. You believe the phone is clean. This is the burner paradox. A device can be completely anonymous until the second it is used to contact someone who is not anonymous. When you dial your sister's number, your call does not travel directly from your phone to hers through empty air. It connects to the nearest cellular base station in rural Illinois. That base station logs your temporary IMSI number, the exact azimuth of the antenna sector receiving your signal, and the precise millisecond the connection was established. At the other end of the line, your sister's phone receives the incoming call. Her carrier registers the connection and routes it through the standard telecommunications switch. Because the Marshals have a pen register and trap and trace order on your sister's line, approved under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 3123, they do not need to listen to the audio of your conversation. The system automatically records the originating number, the carrier, and the cell tower routing data in real time.
We need that locked down.
The call lasts 2 minutes and 14 seconds. You tell her you are running low on cash. You tell her you need to keep moving west. She gives you the 16-digit number and the 3-digit security code from the prepaid card she bought at the supermarket. You hang up. You remove the battery from the phone. You feel a wave of relief because you believe you handled the exchange with professional discipline. In reality, you just handed the technical operations group your exact geographical coordinates. The moment the call ended, an automated query cross-referenced the cell tower that handled your side of the call against the interstate highway network. There is only one major east-west artery within the coverage radius of that specific cellular sector, Interstate 80. The marshals calculate your speed. If you made the call from a rest area near mile marker 112 at 1:15 a.m. and you're traveling westbound in a passenger vehicle, you will reach the commercial service plazas near mile marker 178 between 2:05 a.m. and 2:20 a.m. They do not try to pull you over on the open highway. High-speed vehicle stops at night carry a high risk of pursuit, collisions, and unpredictable crossfire. Instead, they wait for you at a choke point. A budget highway motel at 2:08 a.m. is an optimal tactical environment for a fugitive apprehension team. It has limited entry and exit points leading back to the highway. The parking stalls force vehicles into dead-end slots against building exterior walls. Most importantly, when a driver parks and turns off the ignition to walk toward an exterior room door with a keycard, their physical mobility drops to zero. When you step out of your car, your attention is divided. You are checking the room number on the keycard. You are listening to the hum of the air conditioner unit on the wall. Your hands are occupied. Your vehicle's engine is off. The deputy marshals arrive in 2 vehicles. The first SUV blocks your rear path. The second vehicle parks across your front bumper at a right angle. 4 deputies exit simultaneously, wearing body armor, sidearms holstered or at low ready, speaking in flat, authoritative commands that leave no room for negotiation. They call you by your real name, the name you have not heard out loud in 68 days. You look at the steering wheel of the sedan. You look at the dark highway, stretching into the distance beyond the perimeter fence. You realize that every decision you made since the day you ran, the cash purchases, the discarded phones, the sleepless nights driving through secondary state roads, was undone by a 2-minute phone call to the one person in the world who would never intentionally betray you.
Let them take him.
The United States Marshals Service did not defeat your tradecraft. They utilized your humanity. Because a fugitive is not a ghost. A fugitive is a person with a history, with connections, with people who worry about whether they are cold at night. And in the mathematics of federal fugitive recovery, that worry is the single most reliable transmitter in the world. The handcuffs go on behind your back. They are standard nickel-plated steel, double-locked, cold against your wrists in the 28-degree air. The deputy who fastens them checks the clearance with his index finger to ensure they do not pinch the radial nerve. He guides your head downward as you enter the back seat of the unmarked SUV. The door closes with a heavy, airtight thud. The engine starts. The vehicle turns onto the on-ramp and accelerates back onto Interstate 80, heading east toward the federal courthouse you thought you left behind forever. If this analysis helped you understand how federal tracking systems work in the real world, share it with someone who appreciates investigative depth. Subscribe to the channel, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and hit the bell for the next breakdown.